Hello and welcome to another episode of the Vital MX post-race show. Round 5 of 2025 Monster Energy AMA Supercross has been and gone. The series has gone east, and with that, the dynamic in 450SX has changed drastically. We have a new winner, completely out of nowhere. 250SX East is underway with about as much craziness as everyone expected, maybe a little more, in fact. And we will break all of that down on this episode of the Vital MX post-race show. And our ability to do that is enabled by our fantastic partners at Decalworks, Fox Racing, Yoshimura, and Yamaha Motor USA. Thank you to those companies. You will hear more from them in the coming hour or so, and we really appreciate having them on board. I'm your host, Lewis Phillips, as per, joined by Michael Lindsay. Hello, how are you?
Hanging in there. Hour of sleep in the last 2 days. We're feeling good right now.
Okay, would you like to bow out?
No,
Okay.
I'm here for the long haul. I'm here for the people. I'm here for you.
Okay, so last week, you wanted credit for fighting through and not doing work, but this week you want credit for fighting through and doing work.
I'm just covering all my bases.
Okay, because it's odd. It's just odd positioning for last week.
What? 1 week I need to show that I'm a fan of the sport. The next week I need to show that I actually do my job.
It's just odd positioning for 1 week to boast about the fact that you managed to not do work and fight that desire. And now this week, it's the other side of the spectrum. You can understand that this is... It's like me going... Actually, I'm not even going to try and do an example because that's where I get myself in trouble.
I want to hear this.
No, I'm trying to not do very dramatic examples of things anymore. Tampa was... Let me start with this. Was Tampa good for the series? Like, are we leaving Tampa going, oh my god, this is crazy, what's happening? Or are we leaving Tampa a little bit deflated? I guess it depends what angle you want to focus on, but I could quite happily entertain both sides.
I agree, not to be a Debbie Downer, and I mean, the 450 championship a little bit feels like that. The way it was teeing up the first couple rounds, I feel like we're missing out on, what was our initial preview of what was going to happen. Not that it still can't be a great championship, and not that, the guys in it still aren't beyond deserving, but the way it was shaping up, I'm kind of missing out on that pretty quickly. It's amazing how quickly the 450 class has gone sideways. But on the other end, memory-wise, Malcolm's win, absolutely amazing to watch. Home race, this late in his career, the fan reaction, all that. And then 250 class I'm actually interested. Like 450s, I'm a little deflated on at the moment. 250 East, I was already excited, like we said, after the way West has started and been thinned out with the amount of talent in East. It just didn't end how I expected. East is almost a complete flip-flop of what I thought round 1 would look like.
Before we get into that, I want to give Malcolm Stewart a credit he deserves. So let's start with him, and then we'll go into title fight, Chase, Eli, Coop, etc., etc. Not only Malcolm Stewart's first 450SX win, his first top 5 since the final round of 2022. So his first top 5 in 1,008 days, which is crazy. I mean, if you tell me Malcolm Stewart goes that long without a podium, okay, but a top 5? Insane. First win for Husqvarna since 2020, and therefore Rockstar as well. First win for Alden Baker since AP last year, but also, if you go further back, that's just 2 wins for Alden Baker in quite a prolonged period. Malcolm Stewart has knocked off first win for 7 since JS7. First win for Shoei since, I think, off the top of my head, Justin Brayton?
Probably.
Malcolm Stewart has just knocked off a lot of long winless streaks for a lot of people with this very surprising victory that truthfully came out of nowhere, because the first 4 rounds, whilst consistent, whilst positive in some respects, starts were better, there was no sign that Malcolm Stewart was going to return to his best level. So, shocking.
I was just pretty amazed the early parts of the main, watching him pulling that gap on Chase. And I told you this after the race, like running around on the floor shooting, one of the first things that crossed my mind is this conversation we were going to have here on Sunday was, what was the conversation point going to be with Malcolm? Because there was a point when he was gaining on Chase, and then there was a couple laps where the gap kind of settled out and he didn't pull it in anymore. And I thought, man, it's going to be really heartbreaking to have this conversation. This is going to be similar to our Anderson conversation the last couple of weeks of like missed opportunities. Like, what if this was going to be that one chance? And then 2-3 laps later, it started coming together and he actually executed on it. I was absolutely thrilled and amazed to watch, especially again, just it was electric. If you were in the stadium, on the floor, in the press box, etc., any of it, if you could see and hear how the fans reacted.
I am confused by myself because I don't feel the way that I expected to. I don't feel as mind blown as I feel like I should. Again, not being in the top 5 in 1,008 days. This is about as out of nowhere as we've had in the last decade or two. And yet I didn't leave the stadium going, oh my God, what have I just seen? Like I wasn't overstimulated with these wild theories, and I don't know if that's because maybe deep down I always expected Malcolm to do it, which truthfully I don't think it's that. 2, maybe it's Malcolm Stewart was so good in the main event that took some of the surprise out of it. I think that seeing a rider pass effectively every heavy hitter maybe knocks off some of the mind-blownness because you just look at it and you're like, well, that was the best rider. Whereas if he'd got the whole shot and taken off, it's more like, oh my, he's holding on against all odds. The optics were different. Either way you spin it, I'm not as losing my mind as I expected to be. But it sounds like you are more riding the wave of emotion here.
I think it's the happy emotion. I agree with you on it's such a weird term. I'm not like completely mind blown by the ride because like I said, he was the best guy in general. And let's say Chase doesn't toss it into the whoops. I'm fully convinced that Malcolm was going to make the move happen. He was the best guy on track. He was riding phenomenally. Like you said, there was an aspect of preseason, like if we talked about like a him, a Hunter, a J Coop, like we would rate which one of them will get their first win. I think we were at the point that Malcolm was possibly the bottom of those 3. However,
I think Malcolm was at that point as well.
Yeah, and however, in saying that, flashback a couple years ago, yeah, Malcolm, on one hand, I can say, yeah, I'm not surprised he got one. He has been that capable. He is that talented. He is that good. Especially go back to before he got on Husky, like some of the whoop speed, some of the sprint speed, some of the heat races we saw him. Like the ability has always been there, like you said. So the riding and the way he put it together, yeah, it does not shock me. What shocked me is just, like I said, kind of more of, like you said, all the hometown race, near the absolute end of his, would potentially, and coming into this, some of us question if he would race past this year. I think it's just more of the circumstances all surrounding it that have got me like, wow, real, just a really feel good moment. But the performance on track, I don't mean it doesn't shock me. He is that good. Like, just finally came pieces of the puzzle, clicked, kind of thing.
I almost doubt my own ability to look this up because it's so crazy. Malcolm Stewart, and again, don't be surprised if I've got this wrong because it almost doesn't make sense to me. Malcolm Stewart had the 14 fastest times in the whoop section. 14 fastest times. That seems excessive, but it is believable based on how good he was, but still, 14 in what was a 23-lap main event. And I guess... Yeah. Consider that Cooper Webb had the second fastest time amongst the riders, taking the best time from each rider. I guess that makes it a little more believable. The 14 fastest times in the whoops. And I'm looking forward, if Malcolm Stewart is on press day in Detroit, I will ask him. Some of the narrative has been that his whoop speed has gone away somewhat with the Husqvarna move. So what was it about this setup in Tampa, whether it was bike setup or the way the track was built or the way the track developed, something there made it all click. I feel like, personally, it was being able to double, triple, and carry so much momentum into the whoops. I think that was it. But I'm curious to know what it was that made this dial click in a favourable direction, which ultimately he's been searching for years now. That's my point that I'm stuck on. It's taken him so long to find this form, or even form that resembles this. So why now?
One I thought that was interesting is Jacob Johnson that does their video series. I was talking to him after the race. He's documented.
Starring Lewis Phillips.
Oh, yeah, stars. Voiceovers by Lewis Phillips. He's followed RJ through such a terrible path as well, and I think we were all like the resilience. For RJ gets talent. One first things Jacob told me, he said, "This race win here," he's like, it. He goes, "I'm getting bigger feels than like RJ's title," because he quoted me. He goes, "We all think RJ's been through it." He's like, "I've watched Malcolm go through as bad the last 4 years and other stuff beyond that." So I don't know if it's just not as forward as front of mind as what we've seen happen with RJ, but he had a lot to, just a lot of comments based on what Malcolm has had to deal with the last 4 years and how much it's taken him to rebuild and get to this point.
Yeah, in the press conference, Malcolm said that he had some dark moments more recently, and his dad essentially said, sack up or shut up. Like, either retire or get on with it and find a way. Which, I mean, I don't think that I ever expected Malcolm to be in that sort of situation. Fun-loving guy, charismatic. To hear of even a hint of such a deep hole is almost unbelievable with someone of his stature. But so moving forward, I think this is what now I'm interested to see. If Malcolm Stewart goes back to being a 7 to 10 guy, not only will we judge him more harshly, it will be tougher for him to swallow. So what does happen now? Now, potentially, the field is slightly more depleted, so that will open the door for him to be around the top 5 on a bad night. But this shifts the dynamic of his expectation and the expectation placed upon him moving forward now, which is fascinating.
Well, he kept commenting after the race, and it sounds like such a simple phrase to hear, but it makes me very curious how it affects him going forward. He just kept saying over and over, he goes, "You don't understand like how big of a weight, like the weight is gone. The weight is off my shoulders. Like there has been so much pressure to do this, like my whole career to be this guy. Like the weight is lifted." On one hand, I'm like, okay, will this allow him to unlock this? Will this allow him to freely ride like this, knowing it's doable? Or the counter is, if the weight is lifted, does the drive it took to finally get to this point, does it get a little bit deflated?
Well,
really curious.
This is what I also want to ask him. Maybe it was an act, but at the Anaheim Media Days in December, I said to him, what did I say? Something like, if you never get this win, will it be tough for you to swallow? And he kind of said no, and I got the impression that he kind of let it go.
Yeah.
So I wonder if actually, if that was an act and the weight was still on him, or if he had actually released the weight from himself in the off-season, and maybe that was the key, in a roundabout way, to this relaxed form coming back.
Yeah. Again, you won't be judged on, because it's got to be hard, of course, him being James's little brother, like to go, if Malcolm win his whole career without getting a premier Supercross win, like that probably weighs on him. But on one aspect, you're you're your own person, like it doesn't matter. Maybe that does help. Like I said, if he had not given up, but had released like that, I'm expected to do this, like my career is in shambles if I don't live up to this. Maybe if that is the case, if he kind of let go of that feeling, maybe that did help him get to this point, just being like, I'll just be the best I can be, and it is what it is, and just enjoy the ride.
Well done, Malcolm. Well done, Husqvarna. Honestly, final question. I actually forgot that I wanted to ask this. Without being too biased to recency, has the Husqvarna experiment in America specifically been a success? Has it worked? Limited success is my point, although there is championships, there are wins with multiple riders, but also for a manufacturer to go 4.5 years without a win is shocking. This is a good opportunity to take a step back and look at Husqvarna?
It's interesting because we talked about the guys that got titles with the brand are the ones that
were just inherited.
I wouldn't say like not giving up. Sorry, what?
Were just inherited, like the riders were inherited.
Inherited, or riders that certain teams did one, or people had kind of given up on in a sense. Like Zacho was a bit long in the tooth. Look how long it took RJ Anderson. Like certain people just didn't want to touch Malcolm. Like again, just they kind of hung on forever and believed in him. So I do think it's interesting from a team standpoint. Like let's take the counterpart. All those guys we talked about, if they were all at KTM and had the career paths they have, I can't imagine any of them would have stayed at KTM long enough to do what they all did at Husky, all the ones that have won titles for that brand. So I think from an experiment case, it's interesting that a secondary brand, in a sense that maybe doesn't hold the absolute pressure that the parent brand does with KTM, the one that is expected to perform at all costs. It is interesting to see how that has worked out.
I will say this as well on the situation. I did that story with Robert Jonas in summer last year where he was talking about the situation with having the multiple brands and how potentially it was the wrong way to go with professional racing. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to. Maybe it's one of the best articles I've ever done. And it's still relevant to this day. But my point being, I really still agree with what Robert said, which essentially, to paraphrase, was to the casual fan or however you want to label it, they see a separate KTM show and a separate Husqvarna show and a separate Gas show, and it lessens the effectiveness of KTM. And this struck me in the main event because watching Malcolm chase, I did randomly think to myself, if this was a KTM chasing a KTM, this is way more impressive for KTM. And I don't know this may be the first time that it's really sunk into me, but even me, who's very aware of the situation, still looking at it didn't give me the same importance as a KTM chasing a KTM. Yeah. So it needs to go, I think. It's time.
There's a part of it that reminds me of like how we deal with shootouts is the whole like, okay, if the KTM wins, fantastic. If the KTM gets fit, we're talking racing before I get to the OEM comparison. A KTM gets 8th in a Supercross, but a Husky wins. KTM is still viewed, in a sense as a racing brand. It's not good that the KTM gets 8th, but if the Husqvarna was also KTM, then the KTM wins. But for some reason, when the Husqvarna wins, people still go bag on Red Bull KTM. Yeah. Oh, look, their guys are 8th or 9th. Same as a shootout because they compete against each other. There are times where we have results where it's like, oh, well, the KTM didn't do good, but the Husky did good. It doesn't get weighed as, oh, they're all good. It gets weighed as, the KTM's not good this year. So yes, to your point, it's again interesting counter because I think again some of the success wouldn't have happened if they were all KTMs because I don't think they would have held on to the guys. I think the mentality would have been different. But to your point, yes, I think the overall value of the KTM brand might be better off if the names we're talking about were all on KTMs because when you have these low nights with the premier brand, the KTM, but the Husky or the Gas does well, if those were KTMs, then just KTM's doing great.
I mean, even if you want to really zero in on a very specific area, I did PRs for KTM for a few years. Well, for Husqvarna, Gas, etc. And KTM's PR today was headlined top 5 results for Red Bull KTM, whereas Husqvarna's was titled a win in Tampa. If it was all one, your headline is we won. But because it's so separate, KTM's has to do a headline of basically this was disappointing, which, again, weird juxtaposition, and I don't know why. I feel like this is only coming to me now, which is weird because this has been the same all along. And even for KTM, Pitt and Robert and everyone, it's almost like in the last 2 years, everyone started to wake up and go, hang on, this isn't great for us. Now, maybe production bike-wise, it is great to have other options available, but I do stand by Pitt, Robert and everyone in their sort of campaign that they're on at the moment where they're telling everyone that like KTM needs to be the racing brand. It needs to be the one that we see because this isn't on.
Yeah.
But
and I think even if the view was to support all 3 of their brands going forward, this has been brought up before by plenty of people, but like separate what they all do. KTM is your premier, your Supercross, your MXGP, your MotoGP brand. Husky and Gas, if you split them up, maybe Husky's the rally, maybe Gas is more the off-road, more the enduro, things like that. Only just not competing against yourself, either make it all KTM racing or give each of them a platform to succeed on and focus on that brand.
Moving on, but also I just wanted to finally note, because it is interesting, Malcolm is of course on WP Components front and back, so that is also... There are critics out there. There are a lot of rumors and talk, and that's something to point to.
Well, and to cover that one, he's actually on a full WP fork and the work shock, which almost everybody else, I think Barsha and Malcolm are the only two left on the work shock. Everybody else went to a WP Pro component shock, like the one that me and you can buy. Forks, of course, are mixed. Certain guys are on air forks. Barsha and Chase are still on a combo of some KYB WP components. But yeah, Malcolm is WP through and through.
Okay, moving on. Although that was good discussion. I like that. Not so much the Malcolm stuff. I like the KTM stuff. Malcolm stuff gets a B. KTM stuff, A. 450 title fight. Where do we begin? Right now, the position is this is Chase versus Cooper. Fair?
It definitely, I mean, not to be too recency biased, but you leave that round and you see a gut punch to Kenny's run at the title. You see the gut punch that Eli took last night. Kenny's is tough because on one hand, it's like, okay, he's not dealing with an injury potentially like Eli is, but at the same time, seeing Kenny fall off the bandwagon from a bad night, it seems like it's tough to see Kenny just beating Chase and Coop week in and week out to bring back down the points gap, you know? He kind of needed to stay in it more. Not to say he can't do it, not to say more injuries can't come, but that's why he feels like he's a little off the back of this conversation now. And then Eli's is as simple as, what form is he going to be in next week? Eli, I think, has the raw speed at times right now that, like, if everything were firing on all cylinders, some people could argue, like, okay, maybe he could fight his way back into it. But if this injury holds him up for even the next round or two, same thing. Especially because you've lost other big front runners. It's hard to see nights that now Chase and Webb won't be in the podium run no matter what, basically, as you lose Jet, like I said, Eli's own pace potentially being affected, not knowing how long to have Hunter back, things of that nature.
Yeah, Kenny is only 18 points down, which did surprise me. I expected him to be around the 25 mark. So that fills me with some hope on Kenny's behalf, because that is still within the operational window, in my opinion. Again, it is a long shot. It was a long shot before Tampa, in fairness.
Yeah. Just from outside looking in, do you agree with me with Kenny, though? It makes you kind of feel like Sex or Webb also have to have their bad nights.
Did you just call Chase Sex?
Sexton? I don't know. I'm mumbling.
I think you just said Sex and Webb.
Well, that's a topic we probably shouldn't go down.
I don't know if that will catch on.
Still got my nose. You want to call that for the title fight, the Sex and Webb show?
I don't think that will catch on. No, sorry, go on.
But I was saying, like, and this isn't a diss in any way on Kenny, but do you agree when you kind of just like to take a glancing look at this conversation, does it look like it would be hard for Kenny to just week in and week out have the results to bring back down that gap without a little luck on his side?
I mean, yes, but the way this is going, perhaps the window of opportunity will be open a smidge more than it would have been. Mm-hmm. But as I said, it was a long shot before Tampa. I think I'm happy to admit that. So, do I think Kenny's going to win the title? No. Did I before Tampa? Probably not. So, has my position changed? Not really. Which is kind of weird to say because Tampa went so well that it should have changed or so poorly that it should have changed my position. I still think Kenny wins the race, and I do think he comes back and either maintains this sort of deficit or chips away a little bit. I just don't see him going on a tear and taking out 5 points next week, 7 the week after, 2 the week after, and by the time we get to Birmingham, he's back in it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I could see him still chipping away at this gap. You're kind of, seeing like all of a sudden being able to, if it was Jet in that position, if it was healthy Eli in that position, you're kind of like, okay, it could swing their way in 2 or 3 weeks, just off pure performance. It could get there really quick, where I think Kenny's, if he gets back in this, it would be a slow crawl a little bit.
Speaking of Eli, I honestly believe that in the moment, he believed that he had torn his Achilles again. The fact that he rode off a track and immediately looked at the sky, that's a man who has no doubt in his mind and is thinking to himself, exactly. Obviously, that isn't the case. All scans at the track came back clear. From what I understand, and I think this is the general consensus that is out there, is the calf muscle is bruised or battered or whatever way you want to spin it. But effectively, unless there is something that wasn't found at the track that has been identified since, and as we record this, Yamaha have not released a single statement about Eli, so this is speculation, but by the time maybe you listen to this, you'll hear something. But unless something has been found since the race, I do believe that he will be a lot better and closer to 100% in Detroit. And part of the reason I believe that is because Eli is not gutting out a 17th in the main event unless in his mind he's like, I'm going to be in this still. If he's riding around going, I'm screwed, he's pulling off and calling it a day because he knows he's out of the title. He must have had an understanding of his health and thought to himself, I will be better next week, I will be back in the fights, and every point does indeed count.
The thing also, just watching him, 17th in the main makes you think like, oh, it just was rough overall. The difference between his heat race and the later, as the main went on, was definitely noticeable. I mean, during the heat race, I have photos of him going through the whoops with his left foot like this far off the foot peg. Like he was riding through the whoops basically on one leg in the heat race. By the midway point of the main, he was putting a lot more pressure on it. Yeah, still the pace was down, but you could see a big difference between his heat race pace and his stance on the bike to the later main. So if you have a Satori something like that or something toward, typically I don't think would get much better throughout the night as swelling, pain, things like that would settle in. It seems like I said, if it's like a muscle bruising or something type, like it kind of wasn't, great at the end of the night, but it seemed to get a little better as it loosened up and he was able to kind of ride through it and understand, what it feels like where his limit is at.
I think this best underlines my stance. This time last week when we were discussing the potential of Jet Lawrence's injury, despite the positivity in the pits, I was quite adamant that I felt like he'd torn his ACL. This time, I'm quite adamant that Eli is in Detroit, and if not 100%, 85 to 90%. And in the mix for a podium. That's at least where I'm at, and what do I know, of course, but that's my gut feeling. What about you?
I agree, in Detroit, I don't know if I'd go quite like, kind of like the 80 to 90% zone. With saying that, again, we just said it feels like the Sexton Webb show. Because what's Eli's deficit? Is he 21?
Yes, he is behind Kenny, but I don't have it up right now. Give me just one more second, and here it is. He is. My mind is trying to do math. 20 points.
21 points.
21.
Yep.
21.
So, same conversation compared to a Kenny getting back in this. What's your perspective on it?
It's too early to go too hard, so I think it's fine. Because realistically, 21 points is almost irrelevant at this point in the season. Now, if he goes to Detroit and gets 9th and that gap goes to 30, then I'm ready to take some drastic action with my claims. But right now, nothing is over. With a couple of good results, and Chase and Cooper will inevitably have bad races, I think it's fine. Obviously, I'm not going to pick him as a favourite, and obviously I will give Chase and Cooper higher percentages. But I think it's fine. Which, terrible analysis, but I'm refusing to overreact.
Circling back to the top end of the field, Sexton Webb situation currently.
Someone texted me today and said, I text someone today and said, Cooper for the championship? And they replied, no, too slow. Consistent, but slow. And I was quite like, I was quite like, okay, I don't think I've heard anyone say that. And I mean, not that this was like gospel, but it's a conversation.
We're calling you slow, Jesus.
No, not me.
No, not you. I was saying someone.
It's a conversation. So I'm opening the conversation, but I don't think that's the case. Because actually, there were points in Tampa where he was riding phenomenally. And even as dumb as it is, the aggression that I saw from Webb stepping on and stepping off the table before the Supercross triple, as dumb as it is to say, there were a few times where I caught myself going like, look at Cooper, that's a different level of aggression from him. What says you?
No, I agree. Same that section. Whoops overall, sand section just looks like more lively. Especially you see the difference in the couple opening rounds as again where he kind of had the sluggish start to the season after being off a bit of December. that's one hard part is I think there's still, like, I see room for improvement. I say room for improvement in the sense of I'm seeing improvements each week.
Right.
I'm seeing progression. I'm seeing these little hints and glisten, like, okay, he's where he's at right now. I think there's still room to improve as the season's going on, which is, of course, hopeful for people that do think, okay, maybe they don't think he has the outright pace right now. I see, flashes of him being able to get there for the people that think that.
It certainly seems at this point that it's effectively going to be 2 Yamaha riders versus 1 KTM rider.
That's interesting.
Yes, it actually is quite an interesting little position to be in. But of course, not surprising, because Yamaha Motor USA are one of the most effective manufacturers in the sport. A lot on offer. If Coop or Eli want to diversify their portfolio, which is a really weird way of putting it, and maybe experiment with different options. Maybe Eli's calf muscle is an issue and he wants to ride a 125 in Detroit. Yamaha will be willing to accommodate. Maybe not, but they can accommodate you if you'd like to do that. Not race in Detroit, obviously, but at your local track. Thank you to Yamaha Motor USA for their support of this podcast. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you're getting a video ad just now, so enjoy that.
It's my freedom, it's my fix, it's the endless pursuit of trying to find that flow.
Do we want to do championship percentages? Honestly, I feel like it's irrelevant until we see what happens with Eli. Okay.
Anything right now would just be throwing a number out there,
Yep.
throwing ball, basically.
Kind of weird that it's taken us this long to get to Chase, considering he led the most laps and is the championship leader and etc. etc. All of these reasons we probably should have at least started with Chase after Malcolm, but where are we at? Where are we at? Do you have any? Are you just going to stare at me? Where are we at?
I don't know why a thumbs down just popped up on the
Because
screen.
you just ignored me. Where are we at?
That's fine. It's fine. Yeah. Malcolm was the best guy on the night. I still think Chase rode extremely well. Number 1 qualifier, correct me if I'm wrong. Weren't we for the day or no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Whole shot.
No
And his
consistent starts, heat and main, correct?
Yeah, which actually is a real bummer that like his best start of the season, and it goes the opposite way of how every race has gone where he's had a bad start. Maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's something to dive into there.
The only thing I wish I could have asked him at the race, again, not to circle back too much on the Malcolm stuff, but it reminded me of the Tomac Denver a couple years ago when you hear fans following a rider that's chasing you around the entire stadium. I'd love to ask him if, like, do your senses pick up on that? Are you so locked in that you don't hear it? Because Jesus Christ, I think I would crumble under listening to that.
Yeah, but then the opposing argument to that is, does he look behind, see it's Malcolm, and go, oh, it's Malcolm, that's fine. Like, because realistically, no hate comms, for Chase, Eli, Cooper, and Kenny, they have handled Malcolm 99 times out of 100. So perhaps he looked behind or caught a glimpse of Malcolm in an opposite lane or whatever, and that relaxed him a little bit, and he felt like he could manage the situation more than he could in reality. I don't think you'll ever get an answer of that because respect and everything like that. But as you said off the top, I think that Malcolm would have got there anyway simply because of the time he was taken out of chasing the whoops. I haven't dived into the sectors yet, but as I said, 14 fastest times in the whoops. I'd be interested to know if he was making up much time elsewhere, but it had to have just all been the whoops mainly. I know that Chase was frustrated after the race and there was a lot of talk. I would guess that similar to A2, bike setup kind of got away from him as the main event wore on. Because early on in the main event, he was great in the whoops, similar to A2, and then it just slowly got worse. But if you're Chase, you maintain the red plate. The cards are going in your favour. They're stacking favourably for you, I would argue. Especially if you maintain a wider perspective, which Chase is trying to do this year, which is fastest qualifier, heat win, whole shot, which is probably the most important one on this list.
Yeah.
I think do not panic is the name of the game here, which in the past has been an issue of Chase's, but actually linking to that, he told me on press day that this week his heart rate was the highest it's been while riding in years.
Really?
Because he's so comfortable with the bike, or in such a good place that he's actually riding, doing motos and pushing.
Yeah.
Whereas even his championship year on Honda, he was searching so much for even that year, which was amazing. Who can forget? Even that year, there was more emphasis on just searching and looking for solutions, where he really is perhaps in the most stable position that he's been in his entire career. Again, hopefully the Tampa outcome doesn't unravel that a little bit. That'll be the point to watch. But I do genuinely believe that he will just take it in his stride, shrug it off, and come back in Detroit and be super effective. Of course, one thing that he doesn't need to be concerned about is his Decal Works graphics, which have served him well time and time again. More red plates needed from Decal Works. And actually, if you saw photos from the pits in Tampa, there was a nice shot of KTM's bikes lined up 1, 23, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, all with red plates. And all of those red plates supplied by Decal Works. You can get your own graphics or red plates if you want from Decal Works at decalmx.com. Thank you to those guys for their support of this podcast.
You didn't like the version of the photo I took on Friday where I didn't even think about it. I went 2, 3, 1, 4.
No one would expect anything different from you.
Hey, at least I shot it. They were all excited about it. It's like, oh, I'll line them all up. And then even the team admitted that they didn't think about it until I posted, and people brought it up in the comments section. They're like, oh, that's right, we do have that. One little funny or interesting one on Chase. Speaking of our site, if you check out Pit-Bits, he has that. It was kind of weird. Caught last week. They have basically like a tunnel they built from the radiator fan to the rear shock housing, and I ran it by a couple like crew chiefs and certain team managers, and nobody believed me that it was a tunnel feeding the shock. Like, it's got to be a tank blanket or something of that nature. Nope, it's a radiator fan that feeds air to the shock to help keep the shock temperatures consistent, which may sound insane, but trust me, the air coming off a radiator is much cooler than that of a shock, which in Supercross settings you can barely touch. That thing is so molten hot.
Yeah, always nice to see something different. Where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? What, 450 class wise?
Yeah, I guess Anderson. Is this another missed opportunity for Anderson? I think so.
Well, the only thing is as things tend to trend this direction with the field, like, okay, does it open up more opportunity? On one hand, yes, is this a missed opportunity, or are there more opportunities on the horizon with injuries and just things that keep seeming to pop up in this class? Because I did mention to him the amount of injuries, and he just kind of shrugged it off and was like, it's always like this. And I was like, I don't know. This seems pretty, like, don't get me wrong. It just seems very odd to have this amount of chaos with your absolute top contenders and in not very straightforward ways. Like Hunter, Eli's, it's not these guys just yard sailing their brains out, you know? It's not straightforward style injuries that we're having happen here. So I'm very, very lost at this point.
I would argue that this was actually a massive missed opportunity, and when combined with the Anaheim events earlier in the season, it has to be getting frustrating because, again, similar to what I said about the championship contenders, how many times has Anderson handled Mookie in his career? So then to see Mookie go on past you and go on to do what you are kind of striving for, it can't be easy to swallow no matter what your stance is public facing. Again, it was set up for Anderson again, and I feel like I've said that a few times this year. And as we now go even softer coming up, we're not going to have hard pack until...
Yeah.
And so we're not going to have hard pack until Denver?
Well, no. So as funny as I mentioned that to Anderson, I was talking about rutted conditions coming up, and he kind of countered back that he's like, Detroit's not that soft. He goes, Arlington hasn't been that soft for a couple of years. And then he was talking about how hard the dirt is that's on availability for like Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania. He was under very much like we're not gonna get that much soft conditions is what he was leaning towards, which kind of surprised me because I was like, well, Indy will be, of course, Daytona.
I'm sorry, how does Anderson know what soil is on offer for Pittsburgh?
I don't know.
I would have loved to throw that back in his face.
He was basing it off of how the PA dirt was, basically. He did say, like, I'm curious to see what Pittsburgh is.
Okay.
He said if it's anything like PA, then it's like, okay, it's not going to be that big of a deal.
Yeah, Philadelphia was hard pack last year, actually, I think.
Yeah, Philly was. So that was kind of his counter of, like, if it's anything like that, it should be hard pack if it's kind of same material, same areas. But yeah.
Detroit used to be a lot more hard pack. It's going softer, But you know what? Anderson's got a point. Good on him. Yeah, I agree. I stand with Anderson. He's swayed me. Justin Cooper, 4th on paper. His best result of the season, looks great. But I don't know. I think I'm losing faith, and I can't help but feel like I'm not the only one for 2 reasons. One, there wasn't much fight in either the heat or the main event. And to be honest with you, when I watch J. Coop at the moment, I don't feel like he's fighting or racing. I kind of just feel like he's logging laps.
Surviving.
And 2, Webb said in the press conference, or maybe my interview, or maybe someone else's interview, don't know, he said somewhere, that last week or A2, effectively Star were like, you've got to stop jumping whoops to succeed, you need to skim. So they found a solution and they figured out how to skim the whoops because that was needed. And the
then
whole
we went
time,
right back to jumping whoops.
no, but the whole time I'm listening to this, in my head I'm going, well, why is no one having this conversation with J. Coop? Or is someone having this conversation with J. Coop and he's just going, no, don't want to hear it. That I'm not buying what you're selling. I will be jumping the whoops. Yeah, I don't, because Chase, we didn't mention this, but Chase, after the crash, had front brake lever was all the way up, and I guess his throttle body was damaged as well. So Chase in the whoops after the crash was slow speed doubling. And then J. Coop, who's just having a nice main event, is going the same speed. And it's like, it wasn't a positive visual situation for J. Coop. I don't know. 4th is great. So you can't take that away from him. But I guess I want more. But then also, to counter, do I expect him to beat Anderson Webb? No, I don't. So I don't know. Well, I don't know where I land.
I don't know, but like me and you were both very high on him this point last year. I would say us this point last year, we're confident he would get to the like. If this conversation was happening around this time last year, I'd be like, yes, he's on point enough that he can run and beat an Anderson and Webb on the right night. And lost that feeling this year.
Yeah, but again, 4th, you can't take that away from him. Honestly, I didn't notice Barsha at all, apart from similar to A2. After the race, I once again saw him deep in discussion and looked like a man with a lot on his mind. But, positive side, that ties his best result of the season and his best result since A1, because he had gone 6, 8, 10, 12. So, OCD fans rejoice. Real nice set of results there, and it maintains with a nice even number coming in at number 6.
Hopefully we don't repeat the trend.
Well, maybe we go to 4.
Oh yeah, if we trend the other way, that's fine. It's kind of weird. Like we talked about this area, like straight up, like who we predicted would be in the winning class, who would take a win this year. Malcolm jumped the shark on that one for us. I mean, Barshed won at least a race a year for a few years in a row. Is it weird to see, again, Malcolm get that win and Barshed just be, I hate to say it, a little bit no man's land, because right now it's like how it seems like a bit of an ass to bridge that gap.
Yes, but I feel like in the past we have seen Barsha fluctuate more than most. Yes. I feel like we have seen him just randomly figure it out. So maybe I'm less critical of Barsha when he's in a bit of a slump, because I have a little more confidence in his ability to just find a way. I don't know if you could even find science that backs that up, but it's at least a gut feeling that I have.
Barsha, Plessinger, Anderson, from most likely to least likely to get a win this year.
Oh, well, you have to go Anderson first. Then I go Barsha. I feel like AP is lost at the moment. In fact, I know he's lost with bike setup. I think now the approach is ride what you've got and find a way. I feel like I've said that a lot this podcast.
Yeah, he started the season on Air Fork and Supercross, which he's running outdoors a bunch, and that lasted one round. He went back to Spring Fork and has been jumping around a little bit on settings.
Props to Quadlock Honda with Joey Savacci in 7th. Much more what you would expect from Joey. And Shane McElrath in 9th. Shane was actually 10th, but Justin Hill, who was 9th, got doctor position for cutting the track, which promoted Shane to 9th. But that is Shane's best 450 result in dry conditions, I do believe. He was 4th in San Francisco last year, of course. And from what I hear, the 6-race tryout for Shane on Quadlock Honda, although not confirmed, there is a possibility that it continues. I don't think it's a completely closed door. But what we heard initially was that it was going to be a 6-round deal, which would have ended in Detroit. So proof will be in the pudding come Arlington, but it doesn't sound too dire, which is positive. Shall we move on to 250s, because there's a lot to get to there?
Yes.
Okay, good.
One last one. If you were Roxon, did you dare try to thread the needle in a sand section between two privateers?
If a gap exists and you don't go for it, then you're no longer a racer. Whatever that saying is, I guess. And I know it's not completely relevant because they were back markers, but kind of relevant. I guess. Like, what do you do? Was he behind Webb? No, he was behind Webb at that point as well. So you're chasing Webb. So, like, the carrot is right in front of you. Maybe if you're alone, you have time to think twice. I don't know. I don't know what was going on with the back markers. It's not like the lap times were exceptionally short, but I don't remember seeing a back marker situation so dire in recent memory. And what made it worse is they seem to be running in clusters.
Yeah.
Like geese migrating in the winter.
Angry too.
So I don't know what that was about either. Maybe that's just, I don't know. I don't know what was going on. It was very confusing and honestly quite scary multiple points. But as we go on and more people get hurt potentially, this could become more of a storyline. So I don't think it gets better. Kind of one of those old age things where it's going to be talked about for years and years, but is there ever really going to be a solution? Probably not, because what can you do? Like Webb said in the press conference, that in other motorsports, riders or drivers fully move out of the way and observe the blue flag. But then when you've got radio and all of that sort of stuff, like it's easier. And you've got more room on, say, some sort of road racing. Car or bike.
Literally just pull off the main line, where sometimes off the main line here you're rolling into a section where just the way we angle in and out of stuff.
Well, even like
easy that done.
Also, if you're on a road track, you pull out the main line, you just gas it, and you're back in the race. If you pull out the main line here at the start of a rhythm section, you're kind of screwed for then a whole or to start the whoops, and like I say, I just don't think there's a solution that's ever going to work or solve this problem. It's one of the unique parts of this sport, which I guess some people would find a beauty in. 250 East, and let me start with this very broad question. And let me preface this with, in the past, Ben Townley won the East Championship with a DNF at the first round. Tom Vial won last year with, I believe, 18th at the first round. So no one is an acceptable answer. And history tells us that no one is perhaps the right answer. But that isn't fun. So, after round one, who are you now scratching from title contention, if anyone?
Well, Pierce Brown because of injury.
Thanks for coming out, everyone. We've got great observations like that on this podcast.
I'm sorry, it's stress. No, you can't count him out. The only thing that's tough is we repeat it is a deep field. However, as we see with regional titles all the time, I think actually somebody talked about it was Malcolm. If I remember right, Malcolm's regional title is just complete chaos all year. Everybody in that field was. I mean, anything can happen, so no, won't scratch it off, but I'll give it a week or two until we have to scratch either like a Faulkner or RJ. Just depends how they rebound the next 2 rounds and then what chaos happens to the top 5 from this week.
Okay, I'm willing to step into I'm willing to step into the arena with a little more oomph.
You're going for it.
Although under the weather and although taken down in the main event, I don't believe that Faulkner, whose main priority is probably just to survive, is going to turn around a 20-point gap, I think, in a 10-race series. Because, truth be told, Faulkner will likely have a bad race of some kind coming up as well. So I'm willing to strike Faulkner from title contention. RJ, who is one position behind him, although it isn't pretty, RJ could go on a run of wins and podiums and maybe figure this out, but it's certainly not favourable. honestly, maybe definitely a controversial pick, and certainly not one that I'm willing to lean into.
I know where you're going with this.
I have massively backed away from Levi Kitchen hype after round one. I didn't see, although it was never terrible, I never saw something that really, it never seemed like Kitchen or the Kitchen that I expected. And actually, if I'd spoken to him after the race, my first question was going to be, you're 2 for 2 this year on first rounds, kind of not going well. And I don't know what that's about, because last year he was Mr. Consistent. Mr. Consistent, who was incredible at moments. And this year it just feels like, for whatever reason, he had pneumonia, which I had in the past, and it's obviously a very serious thing. He then got back to Florida and had a massive crash and had a black eye, so that didn't help. So maybe all of this compounds, but for whatever reason, the train does not seem to be on the tracks.
It's tough because it seems like on paper there's a good amount of riders here that are dealing with something coming in the season, but then you have riders like Anstie and Hammaker and Bennett that had very solid off seasons from what we've heard. So yeah, for basically, even though Levi is considered a default title contender coming into this, to come into the season pretty much derailed his West Coast from being sick, getting hurt, and basically admitting in the press conference he's barely gone to ride the last 2 weeks to get ready for this thing. See that performance meeting, it seems a little bit harder to see that path because it's definitely got to rebound quickly. Again, regional series are short. You can't take your time like you can in the 450s to kind of get back up to pace over 3 or 4 rounds. You kind of got to get there at Detroit, or if not, you got to be there by the time we come back at Daytona. I'll give you another counter, because I would say I was surprised between press day, qualifying, everything. Just wasn't as good as I expected was Vial.
Yes, but no. I will not entertain that.
Not as heavy as the Levi thing, but also I was just very befuddled at the entire. Like I said, from press day on, I was just a bit surprised.
I wasn't, and actually, this may surprise you, but I was encouraged by what I saw, because, and I said this last week, this, in my opinion, is a very raw speed heavy class, which very much goes against Vial's makeup. Last year was not that. It was more of a consistency wins class, let's say, which leans into Vial's skill set. So I never expected Vial to come out and light the world on fire. I expected him to be effective in a very Marvin-esque way, ducking, diving, dip, dive, dodge, figuring it out and being there in the end, despite maybe it not going very well, which is ultimately what happened. Massive crash in the whoops in practice. Not really anywhere on the board in practice. Heat race was okay, but still not spectacular. Considering all of that, to come out with a top 5 kind of gave me hope that he can just figure this thing out, and maybe he only wins one main event, but maybe that's enough. Because look at RJ, look at Kitchen, look at Faulkner. We've already seen that these guys will have problems. And Vial, will he be in the top 6 every race? Sure, I can sign up for that. Even if there is only 1 win or maybe 0 wins.
What do you think, though, if the counter is somebody like Anstie or Hammaker, or like I said, just RJ on a real wins, somebody with the raw speed side of things can put it together round to round? Can Tom counter that? Because I agree with you. I didn't expect, even though he's defending champion, the number 1 plate, I didn't expect number 1 qualifier. I didn't expect just blazing laps in qualifying. I still thought, though, this BS, like I said, it was a little below what I expected. So encountering that, again, if somebody that is more the raw speed side can put this together, how do you expect Tom? Like, what are Tom's odds at coming back against that? And being, like you said, you've seen Tom's type of racing, how he's won championships before. Do you think how well would he be able to counter that?
Well, his effectiveness in his championship will be decided by his ability to sneak through an open window. If the window never opens, he's shut out. So, to your point about Anstie, because McAdoo's got a torn ACL, so I'm pretty sure that window will open at some point. Yeah. And Bennick is unpredictable and unlikely to put this thing together. So there you go, window open. Hammaker, maybe that window doesn't open, although history tells us it likely will at some point. So actually, if you're Vial, and I think if I was in his corner, I think I'd be telling him this, like, this is great. Because out of the guys ahead of you, it's only Anstie who potentially could be very strong the whole way, and even he has never won a championship. So there is optimism. There is optimism there. But as I say, his effectiveness will be decided by his ability to sneak through a gap. And if a gap isn't open to him, then he can't do that. I certainly would not sign up for Vial winning more than 2 races. And in fact, that even sounds high. I almost wanted to say I wouldn't sign up for Vial winning more than 1 race. But that isn't a knock on Vial, because actually there's a beauty in that. It sounds very negative, but I really believe that there's a skill in that, there's a beauty in that, there's credit in that. I think that's the skill that every single rider in this class can't figure out for the life of them.
Speaking of that skill, it's interesting was in the press conference, of course, they paired RJ and Tom together, being that they're both the defending titleists from last year and they're on this coast together. And I'm not going to try to quote RJ word for word on this because I don't remember it, but just kind of paraphrase, somebody threw him a comment about their experience and some of the competition. RJ said something along the lines of, quoting that like him and Tom were the only 2 in this group that had, figured out how to put it together because they're both defending titleists. But then watching how RJ's day started, I was like, no, like don't get me wrong. Yes, RJ did if you want a title, but it kind of just glared to me. I'm like, Tom is to back what you're saying about consistency and the way Tom could win the title. I'm like, Tom is the one out of this whole group that has figured that out. Even, RJ's is still a little RJ-esque at times.
And you know what? I was never high on Vial in the offseason last week. And even at the start of this podcast, I don't think I was. But the more I think about this, as I said 5 minutes ago and as I said last week, I don't think this coast plays to Vial's skill set because it's a raw speed coast. But now that I think about it, maybe that means it plays to his skill set more so. Because lightning in a bottle is difficult to harness. So here comes Vial with his club smashing those bottles.
Here's the other interesting one. I mentioned this in some of our pods at the end of last year. So Tom's also in a weird situation where, RJ has to go 450 after this, regardless. Tom falls in a very unique set of the rules, though. Even if he doesn't win the title this year, he can actually stay down 1 more year. If he wins the title this year, again, defends, he's out. He's on to a 450. But if he doesn't defend the title, the way the rules read, you can stay a maximum of 4 years in the class if you don't win it twice. Everybody thinks it's just 1 defense. Tom could actually race a 250 again next year if he does not defend the crown this year.
Let's get to Anstie. Taken far too long. Pretty much covered the entire class.
Isn't that Max's career as a whole? It's taken way too long to get here.
I actually wanted to think. Well, I wanted to do 2 things. A, this is his first Supercross win on Star Racing, so a great stat is, what would it be? 4,000 days after his Star Racing Supercross debut, Max Anstie wins
Star Racing. Yeah. The longest in Star Racing history.
Like I meant to do that because that would actually be quite funny optics, and I meant to do something else which I've forgotten, but. I wasn't surprised. I don't think anyone was surprised because I think we all knew this was possible. If anything, I was surprised at his start because that was his Achilles heel in the past, although admittedly he wasn't on a star bike.
Well, in counter to that, I was actually surprised on East Coast in general is, a lot of the talk from somebody like Jordan that was there is like, hey, the star bike is very hard to start on. We saw Deegan struggle on the West rounds with the starts. And then Moseman and Colby kind of up and down. And then voila, we have 3 of the 4 star bikes going into the first corner just dominated this race in the main.
Yeah, that is actually a good point. Star did seem to be much more effective. Maybe just because it's where they test and train and set up bikes.
I thought about it. Even though that Star Trek was a little slick, but I was like, okay, maybe just a little more traction off the gate. We're not dealing with it spinning or wheeling or different stuff. Or have they countered all the issues that Deegan has had on the West Coast and actually counteracted whether start maps, electronics, something clutch, just different things. They've tackled that a little bit in the last couple of weeks. I was pretty impressed to see them consistently do it, not just Max, but also Dax and Thrasher's weren't that great, right? But he's the only one on
Thrasher was okay, I think.
Was his okay? He's the
one
only
of
one
them.
on the. He's the only one on a hydro clutch in the group. The rest of them are all still on cable.
But perfect.
Pierce's was good.
Perfect day for Max. Fastest qualifier, heat win, main event win, first perfect day of his career in Supercross, I believe. What stuck out to me is when he won, crossed to finish, there wasn't much emotion. There was some, but it very much felt like business. And it very much felt like I did what I came here to do, box ticked, here I go. And as is true with every rider, if you can eliminate emotion, that's one step of the battle. So if Max can go about this in that methodical way and sit in a Viao-esque way, which he should be able to do as he's not a veteran of the class, but a veteran of the sport. Yeah, I mean, I've said it multiple places. And I would have come down on Max as his friend if this was the case. He has no excuse to not win. He had a perfect off-season. He's happy. He's got the bike now, which he didn't have last year. That was a worthy excuse last year. If Max had got 7th, I would not have a defence. Because we know he's got the speed. We know he's got the skill. He's arguably the best in the whoops in 250s either coast. There's no reason for him to not pull off this championship. And there's that can bite because that's a very difficult thing to stare down the barrel of. But I think that's the reality. I really do. Like I honestly, and I've tried in the weeks leading up to this, I cannot come up with a reason why Max should not win this championship. Can he be the fastest rider in the class? Yes. Can he be the most consistent? Sure. Starts? I don't know.
So this comes back to part where we're sitting there is, I mean, he's your friend, and this might be a little bit biased, but I know, is Max the biggest threat to Tom Bial? Because again, the other guys we all talk about, there is a lot of raw speed, but there is a lot of consistency questions. Is Max the biggest threat to Tom for this championship?
I've had this already, and I want to get this out of the way. One, I've said this multiple times in places. I really couldn't give a shit who's British. I don't even honestly. I'm the least national.
He's British. He's your friend.
But people are saying to me like, honestly, I'm the least nationalistic. Is that a word? Person in the world. I literally do not care about England or any country. Like, who cares? No. 2, yes, I'm close to Max, but honestly, I'm so close to Max that I'm almost like. Out the other side of the friendship window where I can just tell him like after press day he texted me and said, what did you see? And I was like, yeah, you weren't very good there. And that was it. So effectively there's no bias. I couldn't care less. I mean, I could care. That's rude. But what was the question? Could he be the biggest threat? Yes, of course, because as I said, we know that he can be the best in the whoops. We know he's a great jumper. We've seen that. He's often the first one to pull a rhythm, pull a triple out of a turn. That's not a problem. The only problem that I've seen in the past are starts. And he's now got a star bike. So why shouldn't he be the guy to battle whoever for the championship? Because even name me a Max Anstie Supercross crash in recent memory. I haven't got one. Maybe I'm missing something, but I don't remember a costly mistake where, Max Anstie 21st on the night. He needs to execute. He needs to pull this off because I haven't got a reason to defend him not doing that. Unless someone is just straight up better and all you can do is go, got to hand it to them, they were better than you. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a crazy, I'll put it to you. Give me a reason why Max Anstie shouldn't be able to win this championship.
I don't have one.
This is my point. It's not coming from a place of bias. If anything, by saying this, I'm almost putting more pressure on him. If anything, if I was biased, I would protect him by going, he's not been in the class as long as RJ. You could come up with stuff like that, but fuck that. If he doesn't do it this year, when will he do it? Very aggressive, but...
Very aggressive. One, it was earlier on in one of your rants, but I was going to say a counter I thought was funny is, yes, his demeanor after the race, absolute opposite. A good reason why. I mean, Malcolm's is one of the biggest celebrations I've seen between riders and their crew and everything, and Max's was so calm, but it reminded me of what year was it that he won the moto at Loretta Lynn's? 2019, 2020?
He didn't win. He got third.
Won a moto, or got third in the moto, sorry.
Led for a long time.
Same thing. I mean, early days of the HEP team, those guys are ecstatic and losing it. And Max was very calm. I remember, I think he looked at Dye or somebody in the group and he said something along the lines of, "Okay, boys, let's pretend we've been here before he walked up on the podium." Just very calm, business as usual.
Well, to that point, I said this multiple places as well, including to him on press day in a Vital interview. Last year, it was a case of, I could win this. This year, I should win this. The mentality of those two positions in life are fucking miles apart. That is the situation here. And you know what? That's a burden that guys like RJ have had for a few years now. So I'm curious how he handles this, but I hadn't thought of this, and I guess it's a good point. But Max said in that press day interview that WSX kind of prepared him for this, which, to be honest, initially I laughed at and kind of discredited. But the more I thought about it, WSX...
the expectation.
Yeah, like WSX, if he got second, that's almost embarrassing.
Yeah.
So, if anything, maybe that is even more pressure, because it's like, if I even slip up the tiniest bit, I have no excuse. Whereas here, at least you can go, again, so, RJ's a phenomenal rider, or et cetera, et cetera. I don't know why I keep using RJ as the other example. There's many. But yeah, no, I think we've done enough on Anstie, but it's time.
Can I interest you in my dark horse?
Bennick? No,
Hammaker.
Yeah, well, when we were running through the guys earlier and I said Hammaker typically opens a window, there was a bit of hesitation in me where I do feel like this could be the year. I mean, did Hammaker stand out to me for being particularly like sketchy on the edge? No, like he was fairly just rock solid.
Yeah. Number one for the first time session. Of course, Max took it overall, but Seth was very solid throughout the day. I know from talking, this is the first, he's amongst a few riders in here, but first season he's had a real off season, move program to the Lawrences. Just a very calm demeanor. I thought he looked excellent throughout the day. And then talking to him afterwards, we kind of talked about some of the situations, RJ, stuff that happened with Tom, just different guys throughout the field and the chaos that was the 250 class. And I kind of proposed to him, I said, hey, do you feel like there was a little bit of like almost like try hard at this first round with certain people? And he said, yeah. And he said that, he basically committed. He knew that he is way better than he's been before. And he's had the only real true off season he's ever had. But he really committed to just coming into this first race and getting through it and not basically getting caught up in the hype, getting caught up in having to show what he's got the opening round. So just something about his demeanor and the way he carried himself when we were talking afterwards and when I saw it throughout the day, I'm like, okay, I could see, again, I'm not sitting here waving the flag, but I'm like, okay, I could see something clicking here over the next couple rounds. I see opportunity.
Relocated to Florida in the off-season, working closely with Dazzy and everyone at the Dog Pound. So that's only a good thing, right? That can't hurt. It wouldn't be a surprise if that's the key that unlocks for Hammaker potential that no one will deny. And speaking of Hammaker, how about that Fox gear? With a rich heritage and deep racing DNA, Fox Racing has been at the forefront of motocross for 50 years. They empower the world's best athletes like Jorge Prado, Ken Roxon, Levi Kitchen, Joe Shimoda, and Seth Hammaker to chase their dreams. With their gear, dreamers become champions. They honor the past while inventing tomorrow, pushing the limits of racewear and protection. Because at Fox, change is the only constant. Shop their new elevated future limited edition collection by visiting www.foxracing.com. Thank you to Fox Racing.
So speaking, when I said Hammaker, you said Bennick. I'll just right now go ahead and just admit shoving my foot in my own mouth. I was probably one of a few people, and I think somebody brought this up in the press conference. I'm not as harsh as the terms of write it off, but there were some serious doubts for me for Bennick coming into the season. Not that he isn't capable of this, of course, but I just flat out had no freaking clue. You could have told me he got a podium in round one, I'd say I believe it, and you could have told me he just straight up got 14th at round one, and I would have said I believe it.
I think that I would have judged you or anyone in the world who didn't have doubts. It would have been crazy to not doubt Bennick after the way that last year went. And to be honest, I was very, very impressed. Definitely my standout performer. But I'm still not, I still want to see some sort of replication of this form. Even if it's
round one was his best race last year.
Yeah, so even if it's a 10th place next week, but there are flashes of brilliant riding, I'll take that. But I do want to see some continuation of this. But based on what I saw in Tampa, he kept Max reasonably close, didn't look out of control at any point. It was very, very rock solid. There's no reason why this wouldn't continue. And to be honest, I was very hard on Bennett last year, as were many people. It'd be a great turnaround if he could figure this out, because he was very much on his way to being another star kid that just gets dropped and then never finds their way back. If he can be one of a few to be on the cusp of that and correct course and head back towards the light, he would buck a trend.
Rare air.
Yeah,
rare
exactly.
Air.
I honestly, I'm trying to think of a guy who's done that. I can't. So yeah. But no, full props to Bennett. We didn't really talk about McAdoo, torn ACL. He, after the race, he kind of like revealed that he knew that it was going to go this well. I guess the first time that he tested the knee after tearing the ACL, I think that must have given him a lot of confidence. I don't think this was necessarily a surprise to him. And to be honest with you, that would add up, because from the first lap of practice, he didn't look timid or concerned about the knee. He looked like McAdoo. So there was clearly some sort of belief there that this would work out.
No, I agree. Compared to different type of injury, but you look at Shimoda dealing with his hand, you look at anybody dealing with any illness or anything, you can see it in the first couple laps of practice. And same, I actually caught myself partway through both press day and qualifying in qualifying day, just like, oh yeah, Cameron is riding hurt. I kind of forgot about that, just because, again, putting in solid laps, putting in a lot of laps, putting in a lot of heaters, just solid everywhere. Even though, dare I say, a little more contained than what I'm used to seeing from Cameron.
Yeah, maybe the ACL has that effect.
It reined him in just slightly, albeit I have a really good photo of him going through the whoops, ass all the way over the rear fender, both feet completely off, like duck footing on both sides of the bike. So I mean, we still had some Cameron moments, just maybe not as many as usual.
He said he hopes to ride this week. It won't be a normal program, and who knows, because of swelling the next day and whatever else. But he said he does hope to ride midweek, and he pointed to the break after Detroit, which I think is overlooked a little bit. The East is on and then off again. He pointed to that as like, that will really help me. Now, I don't know how. It's not like the ACL is going to reattach itself, but he was really like, I'll get through Detroit, then I can make some serious progress, and then we'll start to climb. So watch this space, I guess. What else have we got 250s wise?
I thought Hymas's day was pretty solid for, what do you say, riding 4 times this whole year?
Yeah, tested for the first time on Tuesday. I was impressed as well. I thought it would go so much worse. But to be honest with you, I thought McAdoo's would go so much worse. I thought Hymas would go so much worse. All the guys who should have been terrible far exceeded their coverage.
Hymas and McAdoo both fall into the same category. And like I said, they must have had a feeling it would work out okay, because even just watching the way Chance carried himself in the first time qualifying session, just very aggressive, very out there immediately, getting the rhythms done, just very much getting things happening very quick and setting a good precedent. And talking to him, just a very calm, confident demeanor for, again, a dude who's only apparently rode Supercross like 4 times this year. So there's a part of you when you see that, it's like, okay, you got to have that confidence. But number 2, there's a part of it's like, okay, he knows something we don't know. Like, it's going to go better than we are expecting.
I would like to put my flag in the ground and claim that Cullen Park is the most underrated rider in motocross worldwide.
Ooh, wow.
Yep. I think Park. I genuinely think Park is really good. And look at the Phoenix Instagram. It's like they don't even know he's on the team.
That was a very fairly last minute situation. I went to I shot their team shoot, and we found out that he was technically out of contract the day of the team shoot. So
technically out of contract or in contract?
No, just found out he was even had a contract the day we did the photo shoot.
But still,
long story. I think he's living up to the expectation, because I've seen Cullen ride a ton, and I think from a racing standpoint in the U.S., and I mean this because I do believe in him, I think he has underperformed the last couple of years compared to what I think he is capable of. What we saw this at Tampa is what Cullen can do, if not more.
Yeah, I really believe in Cullen, and I think that he deserves a lot more credit for his potential and ability because he has delivered like that 7th place a few times. I hear that it is quite possible that Gage Linville could fill in at Triumph here shortly. I think that it could have happened before round 1. I think that they wanted to see how round 1 would go, and there's no way that ride would put anyone off. So I don't see why it wouldn't happen unless the Dirt Bike Depot have insane contracts in place.
I think probably not for round 2, but probably for 3. Because I'd heard it was basically see, if because they do have some contract requirements with sponsors to run 2 guys, but even those sponsors are kind of like, hey, as long as if Austin's doing kind of what Jordan is doing, nobody really, not in a bad way towards the game, but nobody cares. It's like if Austin's at the tippy top of the field and performing, we'll put all the focus on him. But if Austin follows up next weekend like this, I believe I heard the same. We'll probably see Gage. What would that be when we come back at Daytona? Yeah,
and in the same breath as Park, I think Linville has really proven that he's got something to offer indoors.
Yeah, I was a little surprised after last season, and no offense, and the Dirt Bike Depot guys for helping him again this year. I kind of felt like Gage got overlooked a little bit last year. I thought somebody would basically pick him up coming into this year the next tier step up, at least with teams or something.
Well, the beauty in this will be that if Triumph really do pick Linville out of the depot, then the Dirt Bike Depot will really live up to its name.
just selling gear and selling riders to other teams.
In fact, the PR headline should literally be Triumph head to depot, pick up Linville.
Are you gonna write that for him?
I might know some contacts to push that headline along. And then finishing off, Pierce Brown, incredible day, brilliant riding, looks great. Like this was really going to be a new beginning. The switch he needed. Who knows? The sky is the limit. Scary crash in the main event. Didn't look good for a long time. Still not great, but it sounds like it's going to be okay long term. Fair?
Yeah, I called his management to double check in. They're gonna, of course, have statement, but the short version for now is surgery. But better than what the initial looked like. He'll be okay in the long run. No long-standing issues, but they'll clear it up in a couple days. But yeah, very scary situation. I was actually surprised. I thought he was completely out cold. Again, according to management, like remembers everything. Everything was all good. Just a lot of pain in the back area, and they had to take care of him.
Yeah, not good. And who knows when we'll see him again. But even though he only completed X amount of laps in Supercross, I think that statement made. So that's quite crucial. Makes a big difference when things go sideways, when you're really proving how good you are versus in 17th and struggling. So, I mean, it's not much, and it pales in comparison to the terrible situation that he's in at the moment, but it's something to hang your hat on and cling to in difficult times. So we wish Pierce well, of course. Anything else from Tampa? Oh, by the way, Bennick was docked 5 points for...
red flag.
Yes, and for the first time in maybe history, a rider has left for first round with a 5-point lead. Which is really weird.
Yeah, because he went from being 22.17, so it gives him...
Yeah, no one got bumped up. So, just weird.
It wasn't a position penalty. It was just an after-race points penalty.
Yeah, doesn't mean anything, but it's just weird to see a rider with a 5-point lead after round 1. Anything else from Tampa?
I guess last two to touch on, if you have any comments. Thrasher, just odd, quiet as usual, or are we still in the where the heck do we go with Nate and long? Like, where does Nate lie in terms of this championship, his place at Star, or the hierarchy of Star, like where his value is? I
am willing to let Nate build slowly, and as long as that building process does not include a catastrophic crash, I'm happy. So this is step 1 of building slowly, and that is okay in Lewis's book.
And then last one for you. What'd you think of handbrake, Volan?
Honestly,
handbrake, rear brake.
Volan looked incredible. Well, not incredible. Okay, maybe that's too far. Volan really stood out to me on press day. Technique, style, everything. I was kind of second guessing myself, wondering if he always looked like this, and I never gave him credit, but he looked. Yeah. I was
That's how he
high.
Like, PC the opening rounds last year in qualifying practice before he got hurt. Was, like that was really good to watch.
But yeah, I was suddenly quite high on Voland, and then obviously suddenly not so much. But still, no update from Club MX either on what happened in the main event. Do you know?
No, I think I just saw him pull. I think
well, he cased for finish, and then that was it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was a bike problem that caused him to case the finish, or casing the finish caused a bike problem, or maybe casing the finish like jammed his hand or his foot or something. I don't know. But basically, he cased the finish and then disappeared. Anything else from Tampa?
No, very plenty to discuss. So it'll be hard to match that at Detroit.
Well, there is something else to discuss. I'm sure you want to give the appropriate credit and applause and whatever else. So the floor is yours. Floor is yours. Come on. Floor is yours. It's a podcast. You need to talk.
I have no clue what you're talking about.
Okay. Well, that's sad. And
What
if you
was
know,
it,
if you know what I'm talking about, let us know in the comments or on social media. Also, I never mentioned Yoshimura. Thank you to Yoshimura for their support of this podcast. We actually never mentioned Hunter Lawrence either, but it sounds like whatever the deal is with Hunter, which is actually fairly fluid at the moment. It sounds like if he misses time, it will be a week-to-week deal, so it's not like we're in danger of losing Hunter for the season or anything crazy like that. But I checked in with HRC after the race, and it seemed like they were still figuring things out, but it sounds like a knock to the head, and that's maybe it. So potentially he misses Detroit, but don't expect to see him miss the rest of Supercross, which obviously the optics of him leaving in a neck brace is enough to scare anyone. And not that that's really a great read for Yoshimura. So back around, Yoshimura, thank you for the support of this podcast. Superb exhaust system used by only the best, the number one of Jet Lawrence. And I'm sure that as he's working through rehab on his torn ACL, surgery happened this week on Tuesday, I'm sure that what's motivating him to get back on the bike as quickly as possible is to get back to his Yoshimura exhaust system. So thank you to them, thank you to Decal Works, Fox Racing, and Yamaha Motor USA for all of their support of the Vital MX post-race show. Detroit this weekend. It's going to be cold, but there will be a roof, but it's going to be cold. We will be back in 7 days' time to discuss all of the action from Ford Field. That's a tongue twister. From Ford Field. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in 7 days' time.